Chris Liley here, solution architect and business intelligence expert here at Sikich. And he's the author of the Business Intelligence and AI Planning section of our guide. Chris, let's just jump right into the questions here. How should you approach business intelligence and AI planning in your ERP project?
So typically I like to break that down into really kind of three overarching topics. One, make sure that you have your output defined. You know what you're wanting to measure, um, how you're wanting to look at your data, and have that understanding going into it. Second would be make sure you get the right of people assigned to your project that understand the data. So if you're looking at financial data, make sure you have an expert in that data, um, so they can help make sense of that and then translate to how a consumer would see that data. And in that same section, we also want to take into account the governance of our data. We want to make sure we understand who should be seeing it, so that it's secure. And then even once you make the set of data secure, within that set of data, who should see what? Breaking down companies, departments, cost centers, things like that. You want to make sure you're thinking about all that up front, um, so that you're building the solution around that instead of trying to build the solution and then come in behind and say, well, now I've got to make it so this group of users can't see this. It's better to do all that planning ahead of time. And then really the third point around that specific topic would be making sure you allocate time in your budget to analytics. It's a lot of people don't do that. They think it's just something they can easily throw on at the end, um, and they don't put enough money into it.
Okay.
A lot of people will say that a BI project should cost just as much money as your ERP project.
Wow.
So you definitely want to make sure you assign a budget to it, and make sure you assign enough of a budget to it that you're setting yourself up for success.
Okay, so what types of systems or data sources should you consider when you're planning your project?
So really, you can think about bringing any data source that your company is tracking. You want to think about bringing it in. Again, back to point one, you really need to understand the data because you need to know if all the data you have or specific pieces of it are meaningful data. Because nowadays there's just data pouring in from everywhere.
Right.
Um, and it's knowing what data you can make sense of and make useful data. You don't just want to collect it just to collect it. So we want to make sure that it's going to be meaningful data that we can use. Obviously, your key ones are going to be your ERP data from your ERP system, data from your CRM systems, any line of business systems that you may have that are specific to your business, or your industry. You want to make sure you capture that data, and then you want to start looking at other types of data, such as social media data, um, weather data, all this metadata that you can grab and from anywhere really,
Wow.
um, um, to match up and combine with your own business data that will help you provide insights on that data.
Wow, that's very interesting. So on that, according to Gartner, 70 to 80% of business intelligence projects fail. I mean, that's a huge number, pretty daunting statistics. So how do you ensure the success of your BI project?
So a couple points around that one as well. Top of the list probably is going to go back to one of the earlier points I made, the budget. A lot of people don't assign a big enough budget to it. Um, and they also don't even scope out what they're trying to do properly. They're just kind of trying to throw it together.
Mhm.
Um, that's probably the number one reason. But some of the other things I had was proper planning. You want to make sure you've planned out, um, look at your data sets, make sure you take an inventory of all the ones you want to have, and that you understand all that data. Make sure, again, you look at that data governance, um, who's going to need to be able to see it, how secure is it going to need to be. Uh, we want to make sure that we understand our audience. So who is going to be basically the consumer of these reports? Is it going to be a board with the company that usually is going to look at stuff more at a high level
Right.
overview type information, more so than drilling down into details? Is it going to be your controllers? Is it your salespeople? So you really need to understand your consumers of the reporting that you're doing to design that out properly and have a good plan going into how you're going to satisfy the requirements for each of those consumer groups. Otherwise, what you end up with is people that you don't get the buy-in for it, and then the usability just drops, and then you'll see a lot of people think they've wasted the investment if it's not being used. Um,
Right.
so that's one key thing. And then really the last thing I would say would come to when you actually get ready to, you've done all this pre-planning, you understand your data, and now it's time to sit down and design your data models that your reports are going to be built off of.
Mhm.
You don't want to make them overly complex, because the whole idea is that in this day and age, we want a lot of our end users to be able to be more self-service. So we need our data models to be easy to understand and easy to use,
Okay.
so that they don't have to continue to go to a developer or an IT person to write a report or just a new version of a report for them. But if the data is not designed in a way that's easy for them to consume it, then they won't consume it.
Okay. Well, that's great. And I appreciate that insight, Chris. Thanks for this update and we
Sure.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.